Welcome to Fear and Greed, the week ahead. I'm Sean Aylmer, and as always, at this time on a Monday morning, I'm joined by economist Stephen Koukoulas. You'll find him at thekouk.com, 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 and on X using the handle thekouk. Stephen, good morning. First things first, Spring Racing Carnival, how are you going?
Oh, fantastic. What a great weekend it was. I was actually out at Caulfield, and the lead into the Melbourne Cup, which is only a couple of weeks away now, is getting very excited. The Everest is only a week away too. So, boy, oh boy. Caulfield Cup, the Cox Plate, too many races to mention. So I'll be studying that form as well as the economic form over the next little while.
Okay, forget the form for a moment. Read those economic speeches from the Reserve Bank in the minutes. What'd you make of everything last week? Consumer confidence jumped a bit, which was encouraging, but the Reserve Bank wasn't giving too many hints.
Reserve Bank really reiterated not ruling anything in, not ruling anything out. So we've got that issue from their perspective where they are acknowledging a period of subdued growth. There were, in the minutes, an acknowledgement that there was a downward revision to household consumption, which is something that sort of fed their hawkishness, if you like, on interest rates for the last few months. So they were generally interpreted as being just a touch more constructive. There's no guidance. They're not about to cut. They're not about to hike. And I think, like all of us, they're going to be watching the data flow over the next few weeks and few months to work out which direction rates go next. So, their analysis, they can see the slowdown. They're still reiterating the concern that inflation's not falling as rapidly as they would like. So we're back to data watching, I'm afraid. And that's despite the fact that our friends in New Zealand, they cut interest rates by 50 basis points last week, joining the band of central banks that are cutting rates aggressively. That is all of them except for our friends at the RBA.
We'll come to that in a moment because we've got the ECB this week. What about those consumer confidence numbers? Do we read anything into that? Just the fact that they have picked up on the back of people thinking that rates won't rise?
Yeah, look, I think it was an interesting 6% jump in the Westpac measure of consumer sentiment at a 2.5-year high. Now, a couple of things. That is from a ridiculously low level that consumers have been pessimistic for such a long period of time. But it was interesting. The Westpac people noted that it was probably linked to no more rate hikes and indeed the vague possibility that interest rates could be cut. There's also this lagged effect. There were income tax cuts paid on the 1st of July this year, and that took a month or two to work its way through into people's bank accounts and pay packets and the like, plus the fact that we've got the electricity subsidies coming through, plus the fact that the stock market over the last few weeks has been testing record highs. There's some reasons to be, I won't say blindly optimistic, but there's a few things there that are just impacting on that consumer sentiment reading. And when you overlay that with the recent retail sales numbers, now I know that's a little while ago now, but we had the plus 0.7% lift in retail sales for the month of August. There's just a few little hints that we consumers out there, are feeling a little bit better. We're spending a smidge more. We want to see more than just 1 or 2 months of data, but, we'll take some good news having had such gloomy news on the household sector for the last 6 months or so.
Will we get any good news this week when the labour force figures come out?
Good question. They tend to be a bit of a proverbial crapshoot, as they say in the casinos. Look, we've had this interesting issue with the recent labour market numbers. The employment side's been nice and strong, averaging 30, 40, 50,000 jobs per month extra. But the unemployment rate has crept up. It was only a year ago, the unemployment rate was 3.5%. It's now 4.2%. So, the Bureau of Statistics, not their fault, they just do a survey of these households to see how many people are employed, unemployed and the like. But the market's looking for another reasonably solid 20, 25,000 increase in employment, the unemployment rate to hold at 4.2%. But if there's any significant deviation from those numbers, that'll actually feed into that interest rate debate, both in the markets and, of course, for the RBA, who has a dual mandate of keeping the economy at full employment, as well as hitting the 2 to 3% inflation target.
Now, you mentioned the Reserve Bank of New Zealand a moment ago, cutting interest rates by 50 basis points. The ECB are meeting this week. Are they going to do, well, they've joined the party already, but are they going to keep the champagne flowing?
Yeah, well, the ECB are meeting this week, and yes, the expectations are that they could go 50 basis points again, like our friends in New Zealand, and That said, the European economies are particularly weak at the moment. That Germany's in a recession. Some of the other smaller economies are also very weak. And they have had this sharp deceleration in inflation. So inflation's basically at their target already, about 2%. So they've got interest rates that for the Eurozone are quite restrictive. We've had the 25-point cut from the ECB the month before last. So this is where the market's saying, gee, if they're to arrest this decline in economic growth, the fact that Germany's in a recession and we want to kickstart the economy, they may well go 50. So we'll be watching what happens in Europe very closely to see if there's yet another rate cut from one of the big central banks around the world. Really interesting sort of stuff when everybody else is cutting rates.
Okay, so Stephen, to wrap this up, if you were running an economy as we all stand, would you prefer to be running the European economy, sort of generally, broadly? I know that there's a bunch of economies there, but just go with me. The European economy, the US economy, the New Zealand economy, or the Australian economy? And you are the lord and master of all fiscal and monetary policy. You can do whatever you want. Who's in the best position?
Yeah, I don't mean focusing on home side bias, but look, Australia's still got a lot of things going for it that these other economies don't have going for it. And in no particular order, look, the growth and inflation numbers, they'll always be cyclical. So it's not really those things that I'm going to be focusing on. It's more to do with the fiscal soundness of the Australian economy. And while there are still massive challenges about the underlying budget balance and the cyclical budget deficits that are still there, our fiscal position is vastly superior. We do have a labour market that is probably stronger than most of these other labour markets too, suggesting that the unemployment rate and wages growth are going to be a little bit more favourable to us. And the other thing from our friends at the Reserve Bank, if I was sort of managing any of these central banks, the transmission mechanism of what the Reserve Bank does, and that is the pass-through from when it changes rates into the economy, is very quick because 90% of us have a variable mortgage. In the US, it's 5%. It's about 70% in New Zealand, and in the Eurozone, it's actually very, very low. So our potency of monetary policy, which is why we obsess about interest rates all the time, is very, very strong. So I'll give a tick to Australia.
That is a great answer. Stephen, enjoy your week.
Thanks, John. On to the Melbourne Cup in a couple of weeks.
Indeed. That was economist Stephen Koukoulas, better known as The Kook. You can find him at thekook.com and follow him on X using the handle The Kook. I'm Sean Aylmer, and this is Fear and Greed, the week ahead.